Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be joining us from. It's another Veeam Industry Insights LinkedIn live stream. Jason, this is episode 45. Gonna start needing more fingers here soon. Not bad. How you doing today?
I'm doing really, really well. I am excited that today we don't have to be the smart one on the call. We've got someone else joining us. So super excited to see what we talk about today.
Yeah, exactly. Share the load, get a different perspective, which is really what we like to do. Just have conversations in different perspectives. We're going to continue on with has been relatively a theme this year, a lot of cloud discussion. We want to bring in special guest Russ Fellows from the Evaluator Group. Now, Russ, you actually are in the Colorado area, as am I, senior partner there at Evaluator Group. Maybe just tell us a little bit about yourself and Evaluator Group for those that, if they're not familiar.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So, as you and Jason both know, I've been in the IT industry for quite a while. Started out working in testing, in product test, and I've continued doing some of that. I was IT manager and had some development roles, then moved into marketing. And then I said, well, I've just about exhausted my possibilities, so I'll try my hand at being an IT analyst, and found something I really like. So what we do is we work with primarily IT end users. We also work with vendors and help evaluate what their needs are and understand, the best fit for their products. And we cover a number of different areas. We really started out covering storage only, but over the number of years, over 20 years history of Evaluator Group, we've expanded that to cover other, ancillary areas that are adjacent or natural follow-ons to storage. So hyperconverged, obviously data protection, something you guys are well versed on, is a big area of that. But now, cloud touches everything. So cloud management, multi-cloud management, hybrid cloud. So a lot of different topics.
Outstanding. Yeah. So now you're the guy that actually gets to play with things, break things, use them, test them. As our British friends would say, use them in anger, huh, Jason?
Yeah, I got to admit, I'm a little envious of that. I don't get near as much hands-on time as I used to. So I'd love to, especially as we talk about cloud, because that is such a different world than the data center that all three of us grew up on, hands-on keyboard. So ought to be fun.
It really does, yeah.
Before we get too far along, do want to remind everyone, give a shout out wherever you're tuning from, even if you are viewing later, meaning after we close the live stream. We love it, Jason, when those big geos come in like Canada right there.
There you go.
Huh? That's an okay thing. So actually, Russ, we may be getting some Canadian weather here. It was spring for a few days, and now we might be getting back to some winter weather. But wherever you're tuning in from, give a little shout out, comments, and if you do have a question for any of the three of us, comment, please fire that away in the chat as well on LinkedIn Live. We have folks monitoring that. So if you see us looking off to the side, they're pinging us to let us know something's come in. So, or we're looking at our eBay auctions, both we're kind of multitasking here on a Monday morning. So without, further ado, love to kind of jump in. Jason, I like your comment. You usually begin a cloud conversation by letting people know or making the statement, the cloud is not a singular thing.
It's not. We talk about so many things in IT and we say, we're going to use the cloud. There is no such thing as the cloud, right? Mm-hmm. So cloud-based delivery of IT services comes in all shapes and flavors, and even just in data protection, we got cloud-based storage as a repository, backup as a service, disaster recovery as a service. I mean, there's lots of different ways to talk about the cloud. So one of the things that we did not that long ago was Veeam asked the Evaluator Group to go and survey what are people using the cloud for production and for protection. There's some actually rather interesting things that come out of that. But before we get into, what that data says, the cloud, right? Lots of different ones. Russ, if you get to be hands-on, then you've probably known even more than most of us. Each of the clouds looks a whole lot different. Unpack
It
that.
sure does. And yeah, that's a great point, because I sort of knew that going in, but I was even surprised after I started using each of the three. To be honest, I use two of them primarily, and you can guess which two they are, number one and number two, right? I use number three a little bit. And then there's some other ones, but yeah, they're all significantly different. I mean, the tools, the interfaces, the way you interact with them. I mean, at a very high level, the concepts are similar, but the way you interact and perform your day-to-day tasks is quite a bit different. And the compatibility, and that's really where I had a related project, not just to using it for data protection, but I was working on a project to see what it takes to migrate applications into, quote, the cloud, right? And we actually looked at the top two, and the tools are pretty disparate, right? And what I found is that each of the cloud providers has some semi-proprietary tools that they've developed to help you migrate into their cloud. But as you would expect, with a little thought, that of course that doesn't apply to the other cloud, right? So if you're using some tools from AWS, you cannot use those same tools to go into Azure for the most part. Of course, there's some third-party options available, but they all behave quite a bit different from each other. And what I also found is that there was a lot of limitations, just like everything. When on paper it says, I just laugh when, one button this or one click that. It's like, yeah, right. If you've got about 90 prerequisites that work. But so, yeah, I just found, to your point, there's a lot of different tools that you have to use.
So not every cloud looks the same. They're all just a little bit different.
Exactly. Yeah. And so that's what I really wanted to talk about, because when I started looking at what can I use to move applications to different places, I thought, well, I already use Veeam on premise for a lot of different things. And by the way, this is not a plug. I mean, this is truth. I use it because it works well and it's easy to use. So that's a great tool in my bag. So I thought, well, I know that, I've tried it out for DR purposes. You can, recover a VM in a cloud location, right? And I thought, well, what if I use that for migration? So I tried that out, and it worked great. So I thought, wow, this is, maybe something that people haven't really thought of, is this is one tool that works to multiple different clouds. And if you're already using it, it works very well. So I thought that was something interesting.
I like that, because I've always liked to say, Jason, data protection, if you go through all the trouble of grabbing a copy of the data, pulling it across some kind of network, writing it to some location, in this context, a cloud or a different cloud, I mean, that process obviously ostensibly used for backup and recovery. But if you're going through kind of bulk data movement and doing some level of maybe even data translation, data management, the possibilities are actually quite numerous, as Russ points out, huh?
Well, absolutely. And think about this, so all three of us on the call today, we all have just a little bit of gray hair in different places, depending on who you're looking at. And so, all of us have probably spent time where we gave up those 3-day weekends for that migration project, right? And what's the first thing that you do on a migration project? You do a backup, right? And what's the second thing you do? You do a restore to make sure that your backup works, so that on Sunday afternoon, if after 2.5 days of effort, if the migration didn't work, you could get back to where you started from. And so, Russ, I love what you said there, because why not test your recoverability and do the migration at the same time by using that backup copy to seed where you're going to migrate from. That way, that copy is recoverable, and you have that last pristine copy where it came from. So to me, that's a no-brainer. But I love the fact that other folks are discovering that as well.
Right. And the things that I sort of realized after I started using some of the other tools is all the restrictions, right? So you start, they say, oh, yeah, you can move any application. And then there's, about 17 asterisks, right? And you start reading through the limitations. It's like, well, we don't support secure boot. We don't support EFI. It has to be BIOS. We don't support, GPT partitions. It has to be, so it's like, wait a minute now. We don't support the latest versions of operating systems in many cases that I found with some of these tools. It's like, wait, okay, all of a sudden, I'm limited to almost none of my applications I can move. So, and Veeam had almost none of that, right? I mean, there's always limitations, but for the most part, everything works. So that was one big issue that I found that was great. And then the other one that I knew about, but I didn't realize was so hard is, converting from, like, let's say a VM on-premise to an AMI image, right? Once again, there's tools for that. They're AWS tools. And if you want to go to Azure, there's tools to go from VMware to Azure, right? But again, they're proprietary. And somebody else I was talking to says, oh, yeah, we just reinstall all of our applications in the cloud. Well, wow, that's a lot of work, right? And so another benefit with Veeam is it just does the conversion for you automatically. So that's a huge bonus.
I got to admit, I didn't know that. So last year when quarantine happened, our CTO challenged all of us to try to start playing with this stuff, and so I started playing with hosting in the cloud. But I admittedly did not do the native tools. I just said, well, I'm lazy. I'll just do the Veeam restore, and it just worked. I didn't realize all of those things that don't work when you just do it with the traditional native tools.
It's actually very easy. It works 100% of the time without any incident, approximately 62% of the time.
With an asterisk on that. So, all right. Hey, we've been talking about all the different clouds. Let's talk about all the different countries. There's a whole bunch of people that have weighed in since the call started. Let's see. And again, huge shout out to the Canadians. Always love it when the world turns green. Turns out, LATAM is definitely in the house today. Almost all of South America is green, so that's very cool. So shouts out to Argentina and also to Brazil. Thank you for representing this morning. Where else? What other parts of the world do we have? Over in Europe, this is cool. So we got Italy, we got Madrid. Belgium looks like they're in the house. Prague, one of my favorite cities on the planet. Netherlands is up there. We've got some good dev from Veeam up in the Netherlands. Czech is in the house. Austria, Germany, France. Man, almost all of Europe is lit up for us. Where are our Brit friends? We got India in the house, and now I'm starting to struggle a bit. I think that's Thailand.
That is
fantastic. Let's see.
Turkey and Iran.
Yep.
Iran, yes. Turkey. Yeah, the Texas education system did not do well for me. I know that's Australia, though. So yay for that one.
I know that one, too.
Nice. Yeah, it's about 20, approximately 24 countries, number of United States as well.
Oh, yeah, the states lit up after that. Very cool. Mexico's back in the house. I am representing the great state of Texas. We got a couple guys from Colorado also on the call today. Our producer in Georgia. California is in the house. A little early for y'all, so thanks for waking up with us.
Yeah, Arizona, Ohio. Yeah. Very good. Good stuff. So I'm kind of curious, you almost can't have a conversation. Unfortunately, Russ, the elephant in the room is the pandemic. And, I'm just curious, your observation. Jason and I have actually riffed on this on a couple of live streams. Evaluator Group and yourself, as it relates to cloud, either usage, interest, you name it, what have you seen as a result of now about a year of the global pandemic?
Yeah, so it was interesting. What we saw is that, immediately a lot of people said, oh, we need to go to the cloud. And one of the big drivers was VDI, with the big change to remote work, which many companies just either had not prepared for or planned for or wanted to support, quite honestly, in many cases, right? They just didn't like that idea. But they were forced into it quite rapidly. So there was a mass migration of some applications, and VDI being one of them early on. And we know for a fact that some of the cloud providers said, if you're not already a large customer with us, we don't have room for you. So sorry, try again in a few months. So, the early months of the pandemic was pretty hard on quite a few people. If they weren't already big Azure or AWS users, getting VDI instances just was not possible for them. So then they were left scrambling, okay, how do we stand this up on premise, right? So we spent a bit of time talking with people and helping people with that process near the beginning of the pandemic, which is figuring out how to do VDI, which is in some cases something that they'd never really planned to do. So that's what we saw at the beginning.
Interesting. And I tend to conflate because our co-founder conflates. He'll say hybrid cloud, multi-cloud in one breath. And I actually like that, believe it or not. because you kind of cover your bases if you kind of throw them both
Right.
out there. I mean, they're technically different, but would love to get your opinion, and then let's get Jason's opinion as well. I've heard, I would call, credible arguments in support of hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and then there's another school of thought that says, well, maybe you want to standardize, maybe, either for technical reasons, administrative reasons, or purchasing, etc. But curious where you come out with. I'll just use the mashup, hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, and if you think that's going to be the new normal, the typical reality, or not.
I think so. In fact, we use a similar term, but we don't. We drop one of the clouds. We just call it hybrid multi-cloud. So
Perfect.
That's what we see a lot of our customers wanting. Right, that's their goal in some way, shape, or form, and that includes on-premise. Right, I mean that's part of hybrid cloud is on-premise, and then probably SaaS, pure service offerings, right, as well as infrastructure services from some of the public cloud providers. So a lot of people are really becoming much more mature in their desires and approach and expectations as well. Cost has always been an issue that we thought would be a potential big issue, and we see that becoming a bigger and bigger issue as people start to deploy more and more resources and applications into the cloud, as that cost really can be quite high there if you're not very careful. So that's one thing that we see in some cases driving apps back on premise.
So, right away, I was going to go to Jason next, but boy, you mentioned a bombshell there. So have you actually seen repatriation of workloads back on-prem?
We have, yes. Yeah, and in fact, the study that we conducted with you found that as well, right? So in some cases, people brought applications back on premise for a variety of reasons. One, maybe they just were never planning on putting them in the cloud long term. They were just looking to develop them and test it out there. But in other cases, there's security or data provenance issues, right? Or other legal issues, right? And then there's the cost. And if you just buy per instance pricing, without a 1 or 3 year contract, you can quite easily spend more in a year than you would spend buying the entire infrastructure to run that. So it can be costly.
Yeah, and Jason, as you know, our CTO, Danny Allen, likes to say a certain phrase when it comes to the cloud.
Yeah, the cloud is not a charity. Right. Actually, he has lots of great phrases when it comes. My other favorite one is cloud first, not cloud only, right? And yeah. Russ, I think that's what you're leaning into when we come to cost, right? So it's great that folks are pro cloud, that they're looking at where cloud does fit in the conversation. But let's be very clear. Not everything is a migration type scenario. In fact, I was looking in the deck. I think we found it on slide 15, Mark, if you're able to kind of pull that up. Mark, Russ, you were just talking about the right side of that, where your survey showed that 1 in 4 organizations had repatriated platforms back on-prem. The 23%. Another 23% had said, yes, I wanted to do it for on purpose versus, maybe it's called buyer's remorse or whatever. I was actually just as intrigued by the left side of that research study, where y'all found that only 60% of the workloads that had made it to a cloud were migrated from on-prem. Right. So we always keep thinking that when we say a cloud first strategy, that means that the data center is going to die and that the data center is going away. And that is not true. What's actually happening is that we're seeing that some servers are migrating from physical, some are migrating from virtual. Others are just saying, look, if I have a choice, if it makes sense, I'm going to stand it up in a cloud. And so that obnoxious orange wedge, if we want to call it that, on that left-hand side, kind of reminds me of those old Sherbert pops you used to get when you were a kid. I haven't seen that color anywhere else. 40% of workloads, they just were cloud first, but let's make sure we're clear, not cloud only. Does that ring true with your other experiences as well, Russ?
Well, with the whole cloud native application environment being vastly different, because I've been playing around with that for about a year, and I like to say I'm almost to the point where I have an idea of what I don't know, but I'm not quite there yet. There's a lot to learn. I've learned a lot, and I have a lot more to learn. So, the whole Kubernetes container world is just vastly different, I found, from, the world I've lived in. Virtualization was just a nice bonus for IT people. It just made their life easier. It really didn't change the way applications ran, or it didn't need to. I mean, it could if you wanted it to, but it really didn't force any changes. Cloud native is just completely different, and it's a much different world. And I think a lot of the IT people we talk with are saying that, yeah, we don't know how to stand up these environments, so our developers are putting the applications up in the cloud just to get things running and working, but we intend to run them on premise. So we're trying to figure it out so we can support it when they bring it back on premise. So I think in some cases people are developing in the cloud just because they can get infrastructure working there, but that's not their intent to keep it there in some cases.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So Dave has talked about, his days start from the mainframe. My days start from NetWare and mid-range. And for all that time working up, it was always OS on metal. And then on top of that, you put an application. And that's just how we ran the data center for 30 years. I'm watching some of the stuff that our colleague Michael Cade is coming out with around Kubernetes and cloud native. And I just can't keep up. It is truly a different way to deliver IT.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me of back when, some of us may have only dealt with compiled languages, and then you get to something where, there's no variable declaration, there's no procedures where you mention those variables. It's just interpreted and you go. And there's good and bad with that. I mean, that is wonderful for iterating through. But Russ, when you were describing how, some people may burst into this elastic area for resources, the cloud, with the thought of bringing it back, I always slightly cringe that, sometimes there's this tendency, well, it's kind of working, so we're kind of in production, and we'll kind of get to it later maybe to finish the rest of it. But, of course, often that doesn't happen.
That's exactly right. And I think that'll happen in a lot of cases. But I think the big driver will be cost, right? So if there's, if you're a smaller company and there is a lot of overhead and infrastructure required and knowledge, I don't think DevOps people really exist for the most part. I think people are forced into that role, but developer / operator, that's just not a natural fit. Either you're a developer and that's what you want to do, or you're an IT person, right? You're not. I mean, there's people who can do both, but that's probably not very many people's goals. So I think that DevOps person required to run a Kubernetes environment today is a pretty rare thing. So I think, once we get things working, I think cost and other issues will be the big driver where the application goes. If you're a smaller company, it's probably cheaper to run it in the cloud. But, if you've got tens of thousands of instances and you're going, you plan to do this for multiple years, I got to think it's going to be quite a bit cheaper to do it on premise.
Yeah, it's almost a rent or own situation, and then scale and time comes into play as well. And I like what you mentioned there, Russ. And Jason, we kind of have a slide that's sort of the good and the bad of the cloud, and I might put a finer point on what we're talking about here, even if it's a little difficult to read or parse this. The short punchline is you're going to see some of the same things on both the left-hand side and the right-hand side. And actually, I'll kick it over to you, Jason, to walk us through that.
Yeah, so in the same study that Evaluator Group did, one of the things that Dave and I thought was really interesting was we asked organizations, okay, so if you're using the public cloud, what did you get good out of it? That's the left-hand side. And then we saw on the right-hand side, what were your challenges? And Russ, something that you just said really kind of struck a nerve with me, and that is, you're either typically a traditional IT operations type person or you're a DevOps person, and usually you don't see both. And I think that's what probably worries me, and maybe that helps me understand this slide a little better, in that if you have IT operational skills, then you are probably able to harness the good parts of that cloud and beat some of the challenges that are on the right-hand side. I do not have those cloud architect skills. So I had those connectivity performance issues when I tried to stand it up. I had those security issues because the way I figured out connectivity was I just opened up all the firewalls and then everything was able to be seen. And my guess is if you're a DevOps guy, that's what you did, right? Because you don't come from an IT operations pedigree. And that's actually what concerns me about that. But maybe that actually helps explain why some of these things like scalability and uptime are on the left and then downtime and connectivity issues are on the right. That's two sides of the same coin, isn't it, Russ?
It is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And I like your point about just opening up all the ports in the firewall, because as a developer, when I put my developer hat on, I guess I kind of am a DevOps person, because we do a lot of testing. So when I'm doing testing and trying to get something to work, first thing I do is just turn off the firewall and everything, right? Does it work now? Okay, great. I don't care about security because I'm just testing. But an IT person, right, concerned with production and safeguarding data, they take you take the opposite approach, which is you start with everything completely locked down, and then one by one you open up things in order to get the bare minimal set in order to get an application working. And then you stop, right? So start with completely locked down and then open things up. And in a way, the cloud kind of operates in that model, right? So when I've used Azure and AWS, by default, the policies are completely locked down on everything, right? The policy on a virtual machine is nothing can talk to it, and you don't have an external address, right? And there's complete firewall and with your virtual private cloud. So yeah, I think to your point, these are different sides of the same coin, depending on how you look at it.
Good comment from Bob K. Bob K says, hey, cloud native, it's kind of the blurring of lines between development and IT infrastructure. And I think that's extremely accurate. I also want to give a shout out to our Veeam Vanguard, Didier, from coming in from Belgium. I know we've got like a half a dozen new countries that have also popped. If you have any other questions, comments, please do chime in. But I think what we're discovering, Jason, is really cloud is many things to many people. Yep. It's an evolving landscape, but I just keep coming back to, and love to get your guys' thoughts, best practices still prevail, meaning, choose your workload, understand your reasons for going to a delivery model, to a specific type of infrastructure or not, and choose wisely. And it's probably going to be case by case. And I love that Russ brought in, without us even prompting, on-prem still plays a role in hybrid cloud, multi-cloud, or at least it could.
Yes, it does.
Well, let's hit the map real quick as we start to wind down. And I think we do have several other places. We've got Hungary, we've got Sweden, UK heard you, Jason. They responded. Nigeria, we've got some other U.S. locations of Denver, of Little Rock. So I think we're sneaking up on 36 different countries and over half a dozen United States, which is awesome. And then, what we'll typically see, Russ, is within the next literally handful of days, this week, we'll probably have 3, 4, 5, 6 other countries and numerous other viewers come in. So as we start to wind down now, first and foremost, want to thank Russ Fellows from Evaluator Group for joining us here. Russ is in the great state of Colorado, senior partner at Evaluator Group, and definitely encourage people to go check out that website. Now, one of the cool things I think, Russ, about Evaluator Groups is you do have some content that's downloadable even if you're not currently an Evaluator Group client. And it's not like content like, here's a paragraph on the problem. It's actually pretty deep and meaningful, meaning you offer insights and advice as well.
Yeah, that's right. And so what we do is anything when we work with a company like you and you sponsor, research or a paper or something, we typically make that freely available to people. But then apart from that, we have in-depth reviews of a lot of different products. I've lost count how many different products we review in depth, but it's well over 150. And there's a lot of details. Those are, 10, 20 page, research studies into the details. But apart from that, we also provide free of charge to people sort of the getting started. So here's what you need to know if you're sort of new to this area. Here's the things that you should consider, and here's how you should go about making a decision for what product or tools to use to solve your unique problem, right? Because most of the products being sold today, well, I hate to give any credence to your competitors, but the truth is most of the products being sold today have some value for some people. Otherwise, They wouldn't still be sold, right? So, is any one product always the best fit for any one customer? No. So what we're trying to do is just help people figure out, what unique needs they have and how to best meet those.
Brilliant. And quick tease ahead. Jason and I are going to be practicing our sleep deprivation capabilities. And for our APJ friends, this week, meaning our United States Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, be next day, Thursday, 9 a.m. Singapore time. We're going to be doing a LinkedIn live stream just like this, walking through our data protection report, but with data specific to the Asia Pacific Japan region. So unfortunately, a lot of times we say, hey, can you come to us or watch us later? Well, this time we're going to stay up, get a cup of coffee, and we're going to come to you on your time zone. So we're looking forward to that. And yes, coffee is good. That was nice. Nice. Very good. We're not in the hardware business, but we do get swag. We do understand that business. And then Friday, our good friends David Hill, Sam Nichols, speaking of cloud, they're going to be talking about the ever-changing world of cloud backup at the exact same time that we're coming to you live. Today, they'll be joining on April 16th, Friday. And then I know it's never too early to talk about what's our biggest event, which is Veeam On, coming up in May, end of May. Jason, you've been to every single Veeam On, if I'm not mistaken, yes?
I have a couple as an analyst and a couple as an employee. Actually, this will be more now as an employee than as an analyst. So I'm splitting the gap.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, we definitely encourage you register for that. We had tens of thousands of not just registrants, actual participants last year. I know we're all kind of getting virtual conference fatigue, but we're trying to do some things to make it really quick, punchy, and right kind of topics for your needs. So as we close out, Jason, thank you so much. Russ, a super thanks to you for sharing your thoughts, your wisdom, and knowledge with us from Evaluator Group. Always appreciate that. Everyone,
thanks, Dave.
Thank you. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you on the next live stream. Thanks.
Y'all take care.
Thanks, everyone.